David's day at the office had been uneventful until the unexpected announcement: due to a power outage, everyone was let off early. With a smile, he thought of surprising his wife, Jenna. They had been drifting apart lately, caught up in the endless cycle of work and stress, barely finding moments for each other. Today felt like a perfect opportunity to bridge that growing gap. He drove home, the early afternoon sun casting long shadows on the road, a gentle breeze flowing through his open window. As he turned into their quiet street, his eyes immediately caught sight of an unfamiliar car parked in their driveway. A sleek black sedan that certainly wasn't there when he left for work that morning. His heart skipped a beat, a pang of curiosity tinged with an inexplicable worry tightening in his chest. David parked his car behind the sedan and walked up the driveway with hesitant steps. The front door was unlocked. As he pushed it open, the familiar sounds of his home greeted him, only, this time, mixed with laughter and a deep, masculine voice that definitely did not belong to him. Inside, the sounds led him straight to the living room. The scene before him froze him in place. There, on the couch he and Jenna had picked out together during happier times, was his wife, clad in only a silk robe, clearly undone. She was laughing, sitting far too close to a man David had never seen before. The shock of the moment gripped him, the air thickening around him as if to suffocate the rage building inside. Jenna turned, her eyes wide with surprise, then quickly clouding with guilt. "David! What? How?" "Seems like I'm the one who's surprised," David managed to say, his voice a mix of hurt and disbelief. The man, somewhat disheveled yet annoyingly composed, stood up and extended a hand, as if this were a mere business meeting. "You must be David. I've heard a lot about you." David ignored the hand, his eyes fixed on Jenna. "Who is he?" Jenna stuttered, the color draining from her face. "This is Tom. We were just—" "Save it," David cut her off, a cold anger settling over him. He turned to Tom. "I think you should leave." Tom nodded, seemingly understanding the volatility of the situation, and without another word, he grabbed his jacket and left, leaving a deafening silence behind. Once the door clicked shut, David faced Jenna, who was now sobbing. "David, please, let me explain." "I don't need explanations, Jenna." "Not anymore," he said, the finality in his voice more for himself than for her. He felt a resolve settling in, a plan beginning to form. He would not let this betrayal define him. He would act decisively. Jenna reached out to him, but he stepped back. "I think I need some air," he said, his mind racing with the beginnings of a revenge plan that would ensure they never saw each other again. As David stepped outside, the chill of the evening air seemed to clear his head. This was the end of one chapter of his life and the stark beginning of another. No more would he be the unsuspecting husband. From now on, he was the architect of his own fate, meticulously planning each step towards a resolution that would sever their ties forever. David spent the night at a friend's house, the anger and betrayal churning within him as he lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The early morning light eventually coaxed him from his restless thoughts. He knew what he had to do. He returned home just after dawn, finding Jenna asleep in their bedroom. The sight of her, so peaceful, contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions within him. He quietly went to the study, his mind set on gathering evidence. He powered up Jenna's laptop. She'd always been lax about security, her password a simple combination of her birthday and theirs. Emails. Messages. Photographs. David sifted through them methodically, his heart sinking as the extent of Jenna's deceit unfolded. There were love letters, hotel receipts, date photos, a whole hidden relationship laid bare on the screen. He copied everything onto a flash drive, his hand steady despite the turmoil inside. David then prepared for the confrontation. He wasn't just planning to leave Jenna, he was planning to expose her infidelity to those who mattered most, her family, her friends, and her colleagues. With the evidence secured, he made his next move. Jenna was stirring as he re-entered the bedroom. She looked up, her eyes red, a mix of fear and regret written across her face. "David, I—" "Save it," David cut her off, his voice calm but icy. I know everything, Jenna. And soon, so will everyone else. Jenna sat up, clutching the sheets to her chest. You wouldn't dare. David tossed the flash drive onto the bed. Oh, I dare. You see, Jenna, betrayal comes with a price. A price you're about to pay. Jenna scrambled for the flash drive, her face pale. Please, David, let's talk about this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. It's beyond fixing, David said as he pulled out his phone, already dialing. The first call was to Jenna's sister. As the phone rang, Jenna's pleading intensified, but David turned away, stepping out of the room. Hey, it's David. I need to talk to you about Jenna. Can we meet? He spoke into the phone, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held. The next few hours were a blur of calls and meetings. David met with Jenna's sister, showing her the evidence. Shocked and disappointed, she promised to handle things from her side. Next, he visited Jenna's closest friends, unraveling the facade Jenna had maintained. Their reactions varied from disbelief to anger, but all agreed that Jenna had crossed a line. By late afternoon, David's resolve had turned what was once their shared life into a spectacle of shattered trust. He returned home to find Jenna packing her things, her face streaked with tears. Is this what you wanted? She cried out as he entered. To destroy me? You did that to yourself, David replied flatly. I'm just showing everyone who you really are. Jenna shook her head, her whole body trembling. I made a mistake, David. But this is cruelty. David looked at her, his heart hardened. No. This is justice. And it's only just begun. As Jenna left the house with her suitcase dragging behind her, David stood in the doorway, the weight of his actions heavy on his shoulders. Yet, the plan was set into motion, and there was no turning back. The revenge had only just begun, and David knew the road ahead would be fraught with the consequences of today's choices. But he was ready to face them, all in the name of retribution. David watched the last light of the day fade from the living room, his mind cycling through the events that had unfolded. Jenna's world was unraveling, and with every passing hour, he felt both vindication and a deep, unsettling void. His phone buzzed relentlessly with messages and calls, some from Jenna's friends seeking his side of the story, others from mutual acquaintances shocked by the revelations. David responded selectively, his replies calculated to reinforce his stance and spread the word further. Late in the evening, his friend Mike called, his tone concerned. Dave, man, are you sure about this? It's getting pretty ugly out there. David leaned against the kitchen counter, his gaze fixed on the dark street outside. It has to be done, Mike. She crossed a line, and everyone needs to know what she's capable of. Mike sighed heavily on the other end. Just watch your back, okay? I heard Tom's not too happy about how things are going down. The mention of Tom reignited a flicker of anger in David. Let him come. I'm not hiding. As the conversation ended, David's resolve hardened. He would see this through, no matter the cost. His next step was clear, he needed to protect himself legally. First thing tomorrow, he would meet with a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings and ensure his financial interests were secured. The night brought little rest, with David's thoughts swirling in the darkness. Morning found him at the office of a recommended divorce attorney, documents in hand, ready to sever ties completely. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, greeted him, extending a hand across the desk in a plush downtown office. I've reviewed the preliminary information you sent over. Based on this, we have a strong case for a favorable settlement, especially given the circumstances. David nodded, feeling a small sense of relief amidst the chaos. What are the next steps? We'll file for divorce on grounds of infidelity. I'll need you to compile a list of all joint assets and any other evidence of her affair that could support the case, the lawyer explained, outlining a detailed legal strategy. As David left the office, his phone rang again. This time, it was Jenna. He hesitated before answering, steeling himself for the confrontation. David, please, can we just talk? Jenna's voice was shaky, desperate. There's nothing left to discuss, Jenna. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon," David replied, his tone final. "David, I'm pregnant," Jenna blurted out, her words cutting through the line like a knife. David stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding. This new revelation sent a shockwave through his plans. For a moment, he was speechless, unsure how to process the information. "Is it mine?" he finally asked, the question loaded with doubt and suspicion. "Yes, of course, it's yours." "David, we need to think about this, about our child," Jenna pleaded. David paused, his mind racing. This changed everything and yet changed nothing about her betrayal. "I'll think about it," he said curtly, ending the call. The news of the pregnancy spread as quickly as the scandal itself, adding layers of complexity to an already explosive situation. David found himself navigating not just a wave of betrayal and revenge, but now a potential future tied forever to Jenna through a child. He sat alone in his car, parked overlooking the city, the skyline a stark silhouette against the twilight. Decisions loomed large, and the path forward was fraught with implications more significant than he'd ever imagined. The next moves he made would have to be cautious yet decisive, for more than just his own future was at stake now. David sat in the darkness of his car, the city's lights casting long shadows that seemed to echo his turmoil. Jenna's revelation about the pregnancy had thrown him into a vortex of conflicting emotions, yet the sting of her betrayal remained sharp, relentless. As he mulled over his next steps, a sinister plan began to take shape, one that would end their ties forever and satisfy his craving for retribution. The following day, David arranged to meet Jenna at a quiet, upscale cafe, a public place where emotions could be kept in check, or so he hoped. As he waited, he reviewed the texts on his phone, confirming the pieces of his plan were in place. Today, he would end it all with a move that no one would see coming. Jenna arrived, looking pale and nervous. She spotted David and hesitated before joining him at the secluded table he had chosen. "David, she began, but David raised his hand to stop her. "Before you say anything, I have something for you," David interjected, his voice calm but cold. He slid an envelope across the table towards her. Jenna eyed the envelope warily, then opened it. Inside, she found a set of documents and a USB drive. "What's this?" she asked, confusion lining her face. "Evidence," David replied succinctly. "Not just of the affair, but much more." I dug deeper, Jenna. And what I found was enlightening. Jenna's hands trembled as she sifted through the papers, bank statements, emails, photographs, all detailing not just an affair but a series of lies and manipulations extending far beyond her relationship with Tom. There were shady financial dealings and a hidden past Jenna had never mentioned. David watched her face drain of color. "How did you, or why?" Jenna's voice broke. David's look was one of calculated detachment. "I needed to understand how deep your deceit went. And now that I do, I'm making sure everyone else does too." Jenna's eyes widened with fear. "You can't. This will ruin me." "That's the point," David said flatly. "You ruined us, Jenna. This is simply the consequence." Jenna stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "David, please. Think about what you're doing. This isn't just about us anymore." Her plea hinted at desperation, at secrets still buried. David stood as well, his height towering over her. "It never was just about us, Jenna. You made sure of that." As Jenna left the cafe, David sat back down, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and a dark satisfaction. He watched her go, knowing that the next few hours would change everything. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text, a command that would unleash the final act of his revenge. Within hours, the documents and all the damning evidence were leaked online and sent to every contact Jenna had, her colleagues, her family, her friends. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Jenna's reputation, both personal and professional, crumbled. Days turned into weeks, and the chaos he had unleashed took on a life of its own. David kept track of Jenna's downfall from a distance, his initial satisfaction slowly morphing into a hollow victory. he realized the revenge he had exacted did not bring the solace he had expected. Instead, there was only a deep, pervasive emptiness. Months later, David received the divorce papers, signed and notarized. Jenna had moved out of the city, her whereabouts unknown. The last he heard, she had started anew in a place where no one knew her name or her past, a fresh start born out of necessity rather than choice. David stood over the bridge, looking down at the rushing waters below. As he dropped the divorce papers, watching them disappear into the depths, he understood the true cost of betrayal and revenge. Neither had won in the end, both had lost everything they held dear. And in that solemn moment, David turned away, the city skyline a reminder of everything that had transpired. He walked back to his car, the weight of the past finally lifting, leaving behind a man reshaped by the trials of betrayal and the brutal hands of revenge.